One of the recurring motifs in the nightmares that I have had for basically the whole of my life is this scene. It's in my dreams where I walk into a darkened room and there's something that just goes bump in the night. And I'm immediately aware that there's some sort of mysterious presence in the darkness in the room. And sometimes I'm even aware it's an evil presence. There's something bad lurking in the darkness. And in my dream, I'll go to flip on the light switch, click, and what happens? Nothing. Nothing. Click, click. No. And it's at that point in time when I get totally terrified, and I usually wake up, my heart's beating 1,000,000 miles an hour. Right? Please tell me you've had this dream. Anybody? Oh no, this is really bad. 2 of us. Judy, that puts you in a really bad category of people. It's like, oh no, I'm as crazy as Kent is. So I have no idea why that's such a terrifying scenario for me. I've scrolled my memory. I can't think of any childhood memory where that actually happened. I went to, I heard some sort of frightening sound in the dark and went to flip on the light switch and nothing happened. I don't remember. So I've concluded that it really must be this. I'm an adult. I'm like well over the hill, and even as old as I am, I'm still scared of the dark. That's a little bit embarrassing to admit out loud on stage when it's going out over the internet. But I don't feel too bad about that because I'm not alone. Experts who study the fear of things, which actually I'm afraid of people who study the fear of things. Who does that? What is wrong with, what do they want to do with that information? That is just wrong. But experts who study fears say that fear of the dark is a pretty common thing, even among adults. And they tell us, and I think this is intuitive to us, that it's really not darkness itself that's frightening to us. It's fear of what the darkness is masking, right? The dark leaves us feeling uncertain and unsafe and vulnerable and exposed and unable to protect ourselves from whatever might be lurking nearby in the darkness. And so that's why we want to flip on the lights to see what's going on, to see what's making those monstrous sounds in the darkness. Right? So y'all get that. This is our point of connection this morning. This season of world history that we're in, I think is really like this nightmare. The world feels like this really dark, scary room, and there are monstrous noises that we're hearing in the dark, things that are going bump in the night, and a lot of us are feeling uncertain and unsafe and insecure, and we feel vulnerable and exposed that we can't protect ourselves from whatever is happening in the darkness of the world right now. And so a lot of people are afraid, and we all really want someone to throw on the switch, but it just sure seems like click, click, right? Nothing's really happening. And so I think that picture accurately describes what's happening in the world around us right now. And now when we're kids, when we're having that nightmare, when we're hearing things making scary sounds in the dark, we've got a couple of fear responses. We pull the covers up over our face like the picture here, or some of us actually went and hid in the closet if we thought that the monster wasn't in the closet, or we'd hide under the bed, right, if we thought that the monster wasn't under the bed, right? Or we would run into mom and dad's bedrooms. That's what we would do in our fear responses as children. As adults, we have very different kinds of fear choices, fear response choices. And we're seeing a lot of these fear response choices happening in the world, across the globe right now. Different ways that as adults we hide, or different ways that we run as adults. And so I just want to highlight a couple of the fear responses that we're seeing increase and really radically, sharply spike right now in this coronavirus pandemic season. And I don't want to belabor this. I talked about some of these things a couple weeks ago, but here's what's happening. And as I'm saying this, by the way, I want you to think about people that we know outside the walls. Right? This can be a frightening season for us inside the walls of the church, and even frightening for us even though we have our relationship with Jesus as an anchor, in the monstrously frightening dark times that we're in. But for people that we know out there who don't have their anchor in Christ, this is a frightening time. And there's fear responses that they're choosing. And these are the things I want to just highlight for you that's on the increase right now. So suicide rates are going up right now. They're radically spiking. And so I want you to consider that might be somebody you know. Somebody who is thinking that could be the cover that they want to hide under right now because of how frightening the world has become. And they're thinking seriously self-destructive thoughts. That's spiking right now. Addiction and overdose rates are radically going up. And again, that might be somebody you know. That might be somebody you work with. That might be somebody you live next door to who are thinking that's the bed I'm going to hide under. That's where I'm going to run to for safety in these frightening times. Listen to this. Domestic violence is radically increasing during this pandemic. Domestic violence. And so again, that might be somebody you know who is facing that monster in the dark. Domestic violence. This was just in the news this past week or so. Online dating sites are reporting that coronavirus season has been great for business. People are looking to connect online. But listen to this. This is the yucky part. They're reporting that those who are looking to connect with an extramarital affair is just skyrocketing. Skyrocketing. Online infidelity is skyrocketing. That might be somebody you know. That might be somebody you know. And as a result, then, experts are predicting that there's going to be a surge, this pandemic of divorce on the very near horizon as a response to this present darkness. And so again, I'm just wanting us to think outside the walls. That might be somebody we know, a friend, a relative, a coworker. And so then to add to all of these scary fear choice or these noises in the dark, these scary bumps in the dark, we're all hearing these monstrous growls of societal unrest, right? Of racial divide. It's just getting more and more tense. Political and international conflict. And these scary noises are becoming more and more predominant in the darkness. And so people are afraid. People are afraid, and they really want, for the lights to come on so that there can be a sense of peace in their hearts and their minds and their spirits. And so the question I want to ask is, as followers of Christ, or the statement I want to make, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's a statement or a question, but as followers of Christ, we can do one of two things. We can either add to the darkness, or we can turn on the lights. Now, adding to the darkness, just as a footnote here, and this is not a correction for us as a church family because I'm not really seeing it among you all, but I'm seeing this disappointingly so among a lot of Christians, particularly on social media and online. The things that Christians are saying online is just shockingly adding to the darkness. It's adding to the fear. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just making things worse, not better. And I think if Jesus were to physically stand on this stage and address Christians who are adding to the darkness, I think he would say quite gently, "Stop it! Just cut it out! Are you listening to the words that are coming out of your mouth?" Anyway, I'm just making that up, but I think he would say that. So what are we going to do? Are we going to add to the darkness as Christ followers, or we turn on the lights? Which should we choose? All right, let's pretend that's not a rhetorical question. I just need to know what answer you think we should choose. Add to the darkness, turn on the lights. Okay, all right, thank you. We should absolutely turn on the lights. Jesus gave us this as a command in Matthew 5. This is what Jesus said to us. You are the light of the world. This is what Jesus is saying to you. You are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. And like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. So no one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. That's crazy. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. And so in the same way, let your good deeds, say good deeds, let your good deeds shine out for all to see so that everyone will praise your Father in heaven. And so Jesus tells you, you are the light of the world. You are to be the night lights in the frightening, monstrously darkness of the world right now. Being night lights so that people will be exposed to the goodness of the Heavenly Father and will worship Him. And so Jesus commanded us, let's not add to the darkness, let's turn on the lights. And so with that in mind, this morning, as a family of Christ followers, we're beginning a new message series, but not just a message series. We're beginning a new journey. And we're beginning a journey to purposefully turn on the lights for those around us who are afraid. They're feeling uncertain and unsafe and vulnerable and exposed of all these various monstrous noises that are going bump in the darkness right now. We're going on a journey to purposefully turn on the lights for those around us who are making unhealthy fear response choices. Choices that are harmful to themselves, choices that are going to wreck their lives and wreck the lives of people around them. That's the journey we're going on. And the name of this message series, and really the name of this journey, is Everyday Kind of Love. And the name suggests not only where we're going, church family, but it's pointing to how we're going to go there. We're going to embark on this journey to turn on the lights in the world around us through everyday kind of love. And really that makes sense because in the Matthew passage we just read, Jesus already told us that shining as night lights in a dark world means everyday kind of love. Because this is what he told us. He said, listen, you guys are the lights of the world. In the same way that when you've got light in the darkness, you put it up on a stand so that everybody can see it. Well, in the exact same way, as followers of me, let your good deeds shine out for all to see so that everyone will praise your Heavenly Father. And so we as Christ followers are commanded to turn on the lights by doing what? By doing good deeds. That's how we turn on the lights. We do good deeds. We can be night lights in these dark and monstrously frightening times by showing people just everyday kind of love through good deeds. And so that's where we're going, church, and that's how we're going. Good deeds, showing everyday kind of love. And so where do we begin this journey? Well, what I want to do really just as our single point for this morning is we're going to begin this journey exactly where Jesus began his journey. And so in the first chapter of the Gospel of John, we're told the story of Jesus' journey as the light of the world shining into the darkness. And so here's what we read beginning in John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, this is talking about Jesus, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 4, and in him there was life, and that life was a light, say light, for the people of the world. Jesus is the light of the world, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not defeated the light. And so these verses, in telling us, describing Jesus' eternal past, tells us that he's God, he's the Word, and he's also the light of the world. The light for a world that's lost in the darkness. And I love what it tells us here is the darkness can't defeat Jesus, the light of the world. All right? There is hope for these dark times we're in. When Jesus shows up, the switch always comes on. The darkness loses when Jesus, the light of the world, shows up. And so, where did Jesus, the eternal Word, Jesus, the light of the world, begin his darkness defeating journey? Well, verse 14, John 1:14. So the Word, Jesus, became human, say human, and made his home among us. Say, made his home among us. Two things I want you to see here. The Word became human and made his home among us. Let's start with the last phrase, made his home among us. These words can literally translate the original language, or the original language, I should say, could literally be translated. Jesus pitched his tent among us. Jesus camped out. He became a human being, and he camped out among the people who were dwelling in the darkness. And so, where did Jesus begin this journey of being light in the darkness? All right, he became a person, and he camped out with others. That's the big idea. I love the way the Message paraphrase of the New Testament renders this verse. And just a quick disclaimer, if you're not familiar with it, the Message is just somebody who kind of rewrote, paraphrased the New Testament. And it's a fun, refreshing read. It's like a good Christian book. It's just a refreshing spin on the New Testament. It's a terrible study Bible. Don't buy it as your study Bible. It's all right. I just want to be clear. The Message. All right, back on point. John 1:14. I love the way the author paraphrases this verse. The Word became flesh and blood, and he moved into the neighborhood. That's where Jesus began. That's where Jesus began turning on the light in the darkness of the world simply by doing two things. He became a flesh and blood person, and he set up camp with people where they live. And that's where we too are going to begin our journey of turning on the lights, our journey of demonstrating everyday kind of love to the people around us. We're simply going to work on and we're going to work at being flesh and blood people, hanging with people where they live. Flesh and blood people hanging with people where they live. That's how Jesus turned on the lights. That's how we're going to turn on the lights. Spend time with people where they are and just be a person. Does that make sense? Just be a person. Let me tell you a story. Many of you know and have heard the story that Sheldon and I actually began our journey of becoming friends and comrades in arms for the kingdom of God when we both pledged the same fraternity our sophomore year at Purdue University. All right? So talk about setting up camp where people live. Right? That's real life. People dwell in darkness in fraternities, if you don't know that. Just a heads up in case you're thinking about pledging. All right? So over the next 3 years while we're in this fraternity, we were doing everything we could to turn on the lights for our fraternity brothers, personally sharing the gospel with our fraternity brothers one-on-one, inviting them to be part of the Christian Campus Fellowship that we're involved in, inviting them to Bible studies. There was one point in time where we had 45 of the 60 men in our fraternities in our fraternity in Bible studies. 45 out of 60. That wasn't too bad, but probably the best thing that we did, or I'll take the fall for this. I won't drag Sheldon down with me, but we had mandatory chapter meetings on Monday nights, so all the men had to be at these meetings, and we had, just kind of as a chapter protocol, we had to have devotions. And so I would sign up to do devotions whenever I could, and I would just nuke the fraternity with hellfire and brimstone sermons. It was awesome. For nobody. That, by the way, if you're taking notes, did not go over well. So anyway, fast forward a couple years. After graduation, one of my fraternity brothers was in the town, visiting the town where I lived, called me up, said, "Hey, Butch," that's what they called Kent Butcher. "Hey, Butch, I'm in town. Hey, want to go for lunch?" Like, sure. And so at lunch, he tells me, hey, I thought you'd want to know that I gave my life to Jesus. And I wanted to get together with you to let you know the part you played in my journey to faith. And so he asked me, so do you know what you did, Kent, that really made a difference in my life? And so I suspected it was my hellfire and brimstone devotions and chapters that pushed him across the line, turned on the lights for him, or certainly my just fascinating Bible studies with the brilliant insights and the amusing anecdotes that I would share. That it was certainly one of those two, but I played dumb. I have no idea what made such a big difference in your journey to faith. I'm not making this up. This is what he said. He said, Butch, it was when I'd set up my drum set and you'd set up your electric guitar stuff and we would jam to Van Halen. Van Halen? Really? That's what made the difference? What about these wonderful sermons I'd preach when you were trapped? No, Ken, it was Van Halen. It's like, what? Now, I'm not prescribing this, by the way, but this is what he said. He said, Kent, because it was the first time I saw somebody who could be an authentic Christ follower and a real person at the same time. You could be a Christ follower and a real person. All right, that's just pitching our tents where people live, right? And just being a person with them. You know, I thought about this after I told that story first service. I just have these very clear recollections of after fraternity parties, we'd have drunk fraternity brothers passed out in their rooms, on the floors of the bathroom, on their attempts to make it to the porcelain god that they were, never mind. But they would be covered in vomit. And I just remember walking into bathrooms just a number of times, and there's Sheldon, just picking them up, wiping the vomit off them, holding them up while they're throwing up in the toilet, getting them into their bed, making sure they're okay. That's just living with people where they are in the darkness and just being a flesh and blood person doing good deeds, showing everyday kind of love. Right? That's where we're going, church. In these dark times where people are afraid of all the frightening sounds, they need somebody to turn on the lights. You are the lights as followers of Jesus Christ. And so let's go to where they are. Let's camp out where they dwell and just be a person. Just be a flesh and blood person. So with that, I'm going to invite the worship team to come forward. And while they're coming forward, there's even just a couple stories from yesterday, just in my life, that I just had an opportunity to be a person. First was this. I was out working in my garage, and a Amazon courier, pulled up with a package. And so I'm signing for the package, and the driver's African American. And just as he's getting ready to turn away, I just look at him. I said, hey, friend, I just want you to know that I am standing with you, and I'm against racism. And I just felt I needed to say it. I just needed to be a person and just break the ice with this driver. And I think it caught him a little bit off guard, and he just started to walk away. He's like, thanks. And then gets about halfway down the drive, and he just stops dead in his tracks. He turns around and says, hey, can I tell you a story? It's like, yeah, absolutely. And so he came back, and he had a story to tell. And I just, in making this choice to engage and just be a person and be safe and be kind, I just listened. I just gave him space to dwell in the space that he was dwelling in. That's what the world needs for us to do. Just become a person and hang out where they're hanging out. And then just a little bit later that afternoon, a neighbor of mine had told me that another neighbor a little bit farther down the road had taken his wife to the hospital. And so I just make this mental note. I need to go drop in on him and see how he's doing. And so I look, he's out mowing his yard in the backyard way down there. And so I just kind of go run over to him. I said, hey, I heard from so-and-so that your wife's in the hospital. Is everything okay? And he says to me, she's never coming home. She's going to die. And it's just a matter of time. They got some hard decisions that he's facing tomorrow. And he's like, my wife's never coming home. And I just stood there with him, flesh and blood, and I started crying, and I gave him permission for him to start crying. That's just living with people where they are and being a flesh and blood person. That's where we're going. And by the way, I don't know that this individual has ever demonstrated any spiritual interest whatsoever, but I said, hey, can I pray for you right now? Can I pray for your wife? And he was honestly a little bit reluctant, but he's kind of, yeah, that'd be okay. So I just said a short little prayer over him. But that's where we're going. All right, those are just some stories. That's where we're going. The world has become a really scary space right now, and the people around us they're thinking some dark thoughts, and they're afraid, and they just need somebody to turn on the lights. And we just need to engage by getting out there and being flesh and blood people, by camping out where they live. Does that make sense?